I've had my ups and downs with the X series throughout this marathon, but now we're on the final chapter with Mega Man X8. Originally released on the PlayStation 2 in 2004 in the US and 2005 in Japan and Europe. It was also released on the X-Genesis CPX 2 on all modern platforms, which is the version I played it on. Out of all the games in the mainline series, this is the one I knew very little about, even as far as the general reception of the game, since I think X7 did a heavy number on the series that the sales were vastly lowered compared to its predecessors, and according to the document Fuel, X8 was released with a limited amount of slots, probably due to the low sales of X7. I even tried researching for this title, both online and looking at the official Mega Man and Mega Man X works, but unfortunately I didn't find anything substantial. Is X8 a great finale to the X saga, or is it just as bad as the last two games? So, after the bombardment of Maverick attacks, the humans got tired and decided to fund the Data Project, which will make them leave the planet and go to the moon, using an orbital elevator. Kind of a weird thing to go to space now, since I thought space travel already existed in this world, as we see the space stations in X4 and X5. During a night patrol, X witnesses an accident on the elevator. No one was injured. We are introduced to a new character, Yumine, who is a part of a new generation of Reploids that have the ability to copy other Reploids at will, including Sigma, and supposedly are immune to their Maverick. But there's a load of tomfoolery. We are then cut to the opening stage, titled Noah's Park. This game has a lot of not subtle religious references. Anyway, during the opening stage, we encounter that Yumine is kidnapped by Vile, who hasn't appeared since '96, where he died. Robot death is a strange concept in this universe. Nothing really much happens in between stages besides finding out that Axel, who has returned from the previous game, was the prototype for the new Reploids, and that Sigma is back for the 8th time, to no one's surprise. X, Axel, and Zero defeat Vile and Sigma, but unlike the rest of the titles, Sigma isn't the main antagonist, as Yumine turns out to be the true mastermind. Now, has the same motivation, which didn't impress me much. The trio defeat Yumine, however, before he is gone for good, a weird, shadowy tentacle attacked Axel, making him unconscious. Whatever happened to Axel after that? Who knows, as the story ends with the three heroes descending from the elevator to return home, which is the same as being the final game of the X saga. We don't see what happens afterwards. Axel is totally stuck in a coma as far as I'm aware. I wasn't invested in the plot, which might be because besides the first two games and X5, I lost interest in the overall story, despite enjoying the Mega Man lore. Despite my disinterest for the plot, I will say that the voice performances are a lot better, which isn't saying much as the series were notorious for their bad voice acting. X4 still has a special place in my heart though.
No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What am I fighting for?
Mark Garfer does a solid job voicing X, making him sound more mature and professional compared to his predecessors. Axel is now voiced by Jeffrey Watson, and Zero is voiced by Gilbertson, and they do a great job too. Eutis himself is quite close with the Mega Man community, interacting with his fans, and appearing in various Mega Man related podcasts. I even found out that according to my mutual YouTube pal Eric Dradden, he even reacted to the Iris death scene from X4, doing a better performance. The main cast returned for Command Mission and Maverick Hunters, but after that, both Mark and Eutis retired from voice acting, with Eutis forming his own indie game studio named Yap Yak. The characters were redesigned by Tatsuya Yoshikawa, who is known for his character designs on the Breath of Fire series, Yuken Seeker and Finna. I prefer the older designs, but I would say they look good in motion, at least in terms of gameplay, as they look robotic in cutscenes.
Pun entirely intended.
The environments are quite varied too, with the opening stage being set in a jungle covered with waterfalls and wildlife, as well as a sky fortress, though the usual ice and fire levels are still intact. The outdoor stages are usually a hit for me, but there are a couple of duds. X8 ditched the 3D gameplay, only carrying the 3D assets, and returned back to its roots as a 2D platformer series, which thank goodness, as the characters feel just as good as the older titles. Each stage usually has its own unique gameplay feature, which for the majority of the time work, like in Booster Forest, where you can control a ride armor through the majority of the stage, as well as in Pitch Black, which is one of the better uses of stealth in a non-stealth title, as you must avoid searchlight, otherwise a bunch of mavericks come out. The duds are the 2 rideable bike levels, which isn't a surprise, as besides the one from X2, are all bad. The stage titled Dynasty has you tail a maverick named Dinnerbolt Manowar, who has planted bombs throughout the city, as you need to catch up to him before the bombs go off, which can be beaten under a minute. The other stage is called Central White, which is way too long, especially with the mini-boss that appears 2 times that takes forever to take down. And it is made worse as if you don't have X in your party, then you have to replay the entire stage as him if you want to get the Ant Capsule. I don't know why they don't allow anyone else to enter the Ant Capsules, as you could do that in X5 and X6. It would be yes padded. All 3 characters return from the previous game, with X and Zero playing fundamentally the same, though with some new stuff. X gains additional armor parts like usual, with 2 sets. The Icarus armor that focuses on attack power and aerial abilities, and the Hermes armor which focuses on mobility. Unlike the previous armor sets, you can mix and match the parts, so if you want the powerful laser from the Icarus Buster part, but you also want the double running speed and invisible dash from the Hermes foot part, you can do that. It's a lot of fun to mix and match and see what parts work for a particular stage. If you equip all the parts from one armor set, you get the benefits, like if you equip all the Icarus parts, you are able to use the Dinner attack. Zero is able to get multiple optional weapons throughout the journey, like a hammer, lorgnettes, and one of my personal favourites, the spear, which has an insane reach useful in certain stages, like Optimal Sunflower stage, which acts as an enemy rush. I mostly stuck to the Z-Saber, the spear, and the secret powerful weapon throughout my playthroughs. I used a hammer to get one particular collectible. This is the first time Axel becomes playable in a 2D game, so some of his abilities were altered to work in a 2D space. Instead of automatically yachting onto an enemy, Axel is able to rapid fire in all directions, but he cannot fire through walls and has to remain still. He is useful when fighting an enemy from above. Axel also gains the ability to hover for a brief period of time, and can also copy enemies with a similar build to him, although I never really found copying enemies useful besides getting a collectible or 2. Besides Zero's abilities, I didn't find the Maverick powers to be useful, besides in boss fights. The only ones that I use frequently is the Diamond Drift, which fires 2 shots diagonally, freezing enemies, but this can be overshadowed with the Hermes Buster part, which I think is why a lot of X abilities, especially in the later games, aren't all that fun. In classic Mega Man, the powers you get from the Robot Masters were, for the majority, the only offensive upgrades you got, so they felt special and helpful to use in a lot of situations. Whereas within each new Mega Man X game, you have a lot more choices that are a lot more useful, faster, and powerful than the abilities you got from the bosses. Wherein each new installment, these Maverick powers get overshadowed and seems to be there because it's part of the Mega Man Bible. And despite X7's flaws, it had some good ideas, like swapping between 2 characters, which is back, and has been improved since now you don't automatically die unless if you fall off the stage, or if you touch the nefarious spikes, and instead switch to the other character if you use all your health. Like a majority of tag team fighters, you can gain a piece of health back if a character has their health marked red, which can be useful and has saved my skin in some boss encounters. This can make the game a bit easy, especially if you have energy tanks, but I think it's a neat addition if we are going with the multiple characters route. I would say I would rather have all 3 characters in one level, so that would make backtracking less tedious, but I guess it would make the game even easier. There's a super move which can be activated with a trigger button that calls upon your partner to do a powerful screen nuke attack, but you have to be in range of the enemy. This can make bosses easier to fight. The boss gets in is pretty good this time, and maybe one of the better ones in the series, as they have a wide range of patterns and even a second phase similar to X2. Heart tanks and energy tanks do not appear in stages anymore. Instead, energy tanks can be purchased through the shop, as well as permanent health upgrades for each character. My issue with the heart tanks in the last couple of games is that they didn't stack with all the characters, and while I think they should have made heart tanks as collectibles that benefit all the characters, I think this is a decent alternative. The shop not only provides health and energy tanks, but also other upgrades like new weapons for Zero and shock absorbers. This is also where you can get retry chips, which is the only way you get lives, and if you use all your lives, then you have to restart the entire stage. Besides the central white and burn rooster stage, the others aren't that long, and while you cannot gain retry trips in the actual stage, they are pretty cheap in the shop. I don't like how you can only purchase up to 5 retry chips, but this is more of a nitpick than anything. So, how do you get currency, and what collectibles do you get from the stages? Well, chips are the currency that you can easily find by defeating enemies and just playing through the game. The only collectibles you get are the light capsules, which I previously mentioned, and rare metals. Rare metals are hidden in each stage that unlock certain items in the shop, like weapon tanks. Some rare metals are easy to get if you just explore, but there are some that unfortunately require certain weapons, characters, and abilities, which require backtracking, especially if you didn't pick the right character. Some of these rare metals are extremely hidden and can only be obtained with X Crystal War after beating Earth Trilobite. I actually had to use a guide for some of these, as I wouldn't know where to use it. Burn Rooster stage has one where you need to use Zero's hammer on an ordinary flat surface, and then use X's Crystal War to get it up. But there's also one where you need to use Axel's copy ability. While this has annoyed me in some Mega Man X titles since the upgrades don't stack in a new playthrough, it didn't bother me much here, and for that reason is New Game Plus, which allows you to transfer all your upgrades besides Maverick powers you collected. X8 was designed to be replayed so each playthrough can feel fresh, and while you can stack around to get everything in one playthrough, X8 is like, take your time, you can always come back to it. The game can be beaten with no hassle if you don't get certain upgrades. In one playthrough you can focus on X, and in another you can focus on Zero or whoever. Not even some pretty cool secrets like the ultimate armor and new characters. No, the new characters require a lot of grinding. Mega Man X8 is a step up from X6 and X7. It is probably in the upper half of the Mega Man X games, focusing on replayability. It does have its faults with some collectibles being too hidden, the bite levels, and a mediocre finale, but overall it's a solid experience. It's such a shame it came after the likes of 2 notorious games, as well as tons of Mega Man titles around the 2000s that overshadowed it. If you want to try it out, then the X Odyssey Gilbertson 2 is a good way. Speaking of the Gilbertson, I would say the contents are a mixed bag, with X5 and X8 being decent experiences, to downright bad with X6 and X7. I would say pick it up if it ever goes on sale, which it normally does if you want to play these two games. The first X Gilbertson is a good bundle with only one miss, but I wish all 8 games were in one package. After 2 years of playing through the series, it was enjoyable despite its ups and downs. In the future, I would like to tackle more Mega Man games like the Zero, the Battle Network games, and maybe even Command Mission. Before I end this video, a quick question of the day. What is your favourite Mega Man X title? Here is my tier list of the series. If you haven't checked them out, I recommend checking out my Mega Man playlist for more details. I hope you have a wonderful day.